Welcome to SIA's Climate United Academy, the winter outdoor industry's guide to meaningful climate action. Well, hey everybody, I'm Derek Sabori of the Underswell, home of the School of Understanding, and I'm your host, and this is another video in the Climate United video series. Today, I'm with Wes Carter, president of Atlantic Packaging. They're a 75-year-old packaging solutions provider, and he's the founder of a New Earth project. This is a strategic collaboration between outdoor enthusiasts and global packaging suppliers whose mission is to rid the world's oceans, lakes, and rivers of plastic pollution. So we're going to talk about all that. Wes is a third-generation leader of his company with a rich history in the packaging industry. And today, we're going to discuss packaging strategies and sustainable options and how packaging can be a part of your sustainability and climate action plan. So Wes, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Derek. I'm fired up to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm excited. What a history, though, you've got. Before we dive in, what I want to do is you've got such an interesting story. So I'm hoping you can give us a quick background on your company and your path to where you're at today.
Sure, absolutely. For me, sustainability certainly is a personal passion. And a lot of what we're doing today, myself, our leadership, our employees, we've got a lot of our personal passions wrapped up into this mission. And I think it's really appropriate given the foundations of Atlantic. My grandfather, Wes Carter, founded Atlantic in 1946, and he has a very unique story. My grandfather was the first kid in his high school to ever go to college, in the history of his high school to ever go to college. He went to the University of North Carolina, and he paid his way through school by working at the university newspaper. When he graduated from that university, he wanted to start his own newspaper, which he did in a small little town called Tabor City, North Carolina, which is just inland of Myrtle Beach. Initially, his newspaper was just reporting on tobacco farming news because that's kind of what was going on in the Southeast back then. But my grandfather, was a God and country, a power of the pen kind of guy. And he pretty quickly realized that the Ku Klux Klan was really active in his community. They were terrorizing people, pulling them out of their homes, beating them up, doing cross burnings, all the things that you read about in the history books. And, my grandfather took it upon himself to fight the Klan with his newspaper, which is a really dangerous thing to do back then. They threatened to kill him. They threatened to kidnap his children, burn down his house. My father even remembers crosses burning in their front yard as a young child. And through all of that, my grandfather never relented. He continued his fight. The end result was the FBI contacted him and said, we'd like your help to infiltrate this vigilante group in the Southeast, which they did. And thanks to my grandfather, over 300 Klansmen were arrested, including the Grand Dragon of the Carolinas Ku Klux Klan. And that really broke their back. They were never the same organization in the Southeast. My grandfather subsequently won the Pulitzer Prize for Meritorious Public Service in 1952. He was the first weekly newspaper to ever win that award, and he was 32 years old at the time. So that was the beginning of Atlantic, believe it or not. I love that story. I tell it, every week, basically, to customers and suppliers alike. But I really think it articulates the ethics and the energy and the values of our organization that my grandfather really started from the very beginning. There is a documentary on PBS called The Editor and the Dragon that's all about that, and it's narrated by Morgan Freeman. That's worth a watch if you get a chance.
Wow.
But the reason, the real question then comes like, well, how did you become, it's a great story, but how did you become a packaging company?
Right.
In those days, if you were in the newspaper business, you were also in the paper supply business. So the second part of my grandfather's career was really about economic development. And as the textile industry, the apparel industry, which was primarily in New York and Pennsylvania and New Jersey, began to migrate to the Southeast, we already had die cutters and printing presses. And so selling converted paper products, things like collar strips and sock and underwear inserts, that became sort of a side business for my grandfather. And pretty soon those textile apparel companies asked for him to sell tape and boxes and bags. And, our little packaging distribution business just sort of grew up alongside the newspaper. My father, Rusty, took over the company in 1972. And he wasn't a newspaper man, but he was a serial entrepreneur, and he really took Atlantic to where we are today. One interesting little note I will say about my grandfather, he lived to be 88, so I knew him really well, but he was never a business person. He was always a writer. And so when he was in his mid 60s and turned the company over to my father, he moved to Central Florida to be a freshwater fisherman and to be an outdoor writer. And so my grandfather actually wrote probably 25 books about freshwater fishing in Central Florida and was a big conservationist. And that's the grandfather that I remember. So growing up, with a father and a grandfather who were both really water people, we're fishermen and we're outdoorsmen and we're hunters. I mean, that was a part of my very beginnings and is very integrated with who I am today. So 75 years after the foundation of that newspaper, today Atlantic sits as the largest privately held packaging company in North America. And I like to think, there's some real synergies between my grandfather and what we're doing today. He fought for, civil rights during that era. And today, in the era of climate change and plastic pollution, we're the same organization and we're fighting for environmental rights. And so as his grandson, it's meaningful to me.
Wow, what a legacy. What a story. Thanks for that. I mean, just that now knowing that the conservation, that spirit of activism, it's all baked in. But I know even from our previous conversations, there have been sort of eco packaging options that all of us or any of us could have considered in the marketplace. They've been around for some time. But for you guys, when did sustainability, though, really become, as it is now, become a priority there at Atlantic? What was the spark for you?
Yeah, I mean, the word sustainability has been around for quite some time. I mean, I think in my career, when it really first entered the lexicon was when Walmart introduced the sustainability scorecard. And that's been quite a long time ago now. Initially, sustainability was just a code word for, using less. It was a Walmart's way to put pressure on their suppliers to reduce the packaging footprint, to reduce cost. And then it's really evolved from there, where today sustainability is a lot more fundamental to people's brands and people's buying decisions. And more organizations are seeing that how they package their products, how they manufacture their products says a lot about the ethics of their organization to the marketplace. But for us, we have been in the packaging optimization business forever. I like to say we were doing sustainability before it was cool. We just called it packaging optimization. And, for the last 40 years, that's how we built our business, is really through the science of packaging. And that was primarily to reduce damage in shipping by packaging things correctly, and also utilizing science and technology to use less material effectively. And so even today, the primary first rule of sustainability is use less. Right sizing packaging. And that's been fundamental to what we've done for a very long time. So our whole sustainability platform was built on top of this highly technical, integrated consultative model of going to market. So, that's really, where we've evolved is, 5 or 6 years ago for me, especially as a lifelong surfer, plastic pollution was something that I was witnessing with my own two eyes. I mean, traveling around the world, I'm fortunate enough to be able to do that and surf in some really beautiful places. And over the last 20 years, I've seen it. I didn't have anybody to tell me that there was a problem. I've seen it. And I saw where our industry really had an intentional blind spot. We were contributing to plastic pollution as a supply chain, and no one was talking about it. And I felt like, we already do packaging optimization really, really well. And if Atlantic would use our influence to help bring sustainable solutions and materials and process to the marketplace, we could not only advocate for sustainability, but we could help facilitate the transition for companies, because that was the big issue we started to see in most recent years, is organizations starting to recognize that sustainability needs to be fundamental to who we are, and we want to do this. I mean, there's human beings working in these companies that care, but they couldn't figure out how to do it economically. And I felt like Atlantic was in a great position to help facilitate that transition and do it in a way that companies could swallow it. And so once I sort of saw that, and it wasn't a strike of lightning, it was over a couple of years of really seeing where Atlantic could play. And where we could support this transition. And as it continued to evolve, it just became, it felt like a spiritual awakening on some level. I was like, this is what we're supposed to do with the influence that we have today. And my experience as an outdoor person and a surfer and someone who cares for the outdoors, I don't know that we would be here if it wasn't for that.
And was there also influence from outside the industry? I know you had mentioned, you were seeing sort of innovations happen and maybe even some legislature and policy maybe coming from Europe and the outdoor industry giving a push. Did those things help kind of move you in that direction as well?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, one of the areas where I felt like Atlantic could bring some value, and what I was seeing, to your point, is I was seeing a lot of like really innovative new products coming to market, some in North America, some in Europe. I mean, Europe does tend to be ahead of us in many ways. We had opened a packaging solution center, I guess, 5 years ago this August, and a lot of the technology that's in that center I initially saw in Italy. When I was over in Europe and I was doing some work with an equipment manufacturer over there, I got exposed to a lot of this really sophisticated package testing equipment that I'd never seen in our country. And I was like, this is coming, and this matches up really well with who we are and who we want to be. And I was like, why not us? Why not Atlantic Packaging be the people that brings this technology to the States? And so not only did we bring the concept of the technology, we actually took it a couple of steps further. So today, our capabilities at that solution center are actually beyond what I was seeing in Europe. So there was that piece that was a big influencer. And then also I was getting to know a lot of small, like startup companies, really smart people that had, technical degrees from really good universities and, inventors, people like that. And they were bringing these products to us and saying, hey, can you help us scale this? Do you think this is viable? Our fishbone product, which was the first ever plastic ring replacement for beverages, that came from 5 inventors in California who found us and said, hey, we've invented this fiber-based beverage carrier. What do you think? And we're like, I think that's pretty awesome. We'd like to take it to market. And so again, we're working right now with a company out of California called Cruise Foam that is making an EPS foam replacement out of shrimp shells, actually, like the exoskeleton of a shrimp that they're turning into foam. And it's a guy named John Feltz, who's actually a surfer too. And, right now we're like, how do we help John and Cruise Foam scale their product and get it into the right applications with big consumer products companies? So again, I do think like that's a place for us as well. As I just got off the phone with a lady who's in the kelp world, and they're, working on packaging made from seaweed, which I think has really big upside for a lot of reasons. But again, I do see Atlantic's place is finding these new technologies and helping these organizations understand the right markets and how to scale them. And then you mentioned the outdoor space too. To me, the most logical industry vertical to lead sustainability is the outdoor industry. And that realization was why I founded a New Earth project. It was like, outdoor industry, help us. Let's do this together. You guys embrace sustainability. We'll tell beautiful stories, documentary series, social media stories about the outdoor industry embracing change. And actually, this book right here had a lot of influence on me. Let My People Go Surfing. When I read this book, I was like, what Yvonne Chenard is doing on some level is what I want to do with our organization as well.
I love it. And there's a great follow-up book that they did. Not sure if you read that one, The Responsible Company. It's sort of the playbook to how they've done it. He wrote it with Vincent Stanley. It's another great follow-up that our listeners here should go and check out. How was this? I love it, Wes, because I just feels like anytime you got a whiff of something, you guys go all in and you really push hard on the solutions that are available. You mentioned something as well, how important I think packaging is on its own. Good packaging means that it's protecting products and it's protecting those embedded resources in that product, right? A damaged product that doesn't go to market is the one that probably has the biggest footprint anyway. So just your industry alone is helping sustainability and fighting climate change, I guess. How has all of this though been perceived by your customers? I mean, you guys are so big. I'm sure I know you have some really significant customers. What were their procurement people? How did they take it? Were there cost worries? How are they being incentivized, to take on some of these new approaches that you were taking?
Yeah, I mean, that has honestly evolved a lot and kind of at light speed. 5 years ago, if you brought up the word sustainability to a procurement person, they probably would escort you out of their office because what they heard was it's going to cost a lot more. And
right.
In a lot of cases, they were right. Lots of times these sustainable materials can carry a higher cost. And, historically, The marketability of sustainability, the consumer's understanding of sustainability was so limited. And that's been the thing that's changed the most over the last 6 to 8 years, certainly over the last 2 to 3 years on the backside of COVID. Consumer awareness around packaging is at an all-time high, and I think actually COVID had a lot to do with that. Everyone being home for 2 years and you being able to order anything you need in your life from your phone. I mean, everyone got, just a glut of packaging to their house and began asking questions about what is all this stuff and what's recyclable and what's not, and why do I get a box with this much product in it and this much packaging in it, and so that level of consumer awareness has changed the conversation, where now every CEO that I talk to wants to talk about sustainability. And are they being driven by what's right for the planet? Yeah, that's a piece of it, but they're also being driven by consumer demand. In our economy, in this culture, in this country, consumer demand drives everything. And that's why I think, what we're doing today, talking about these things, creating media, creating more awareness with consumers is so critical to this mission. But again, it really has shifted quite a lot, where today, I believe brands more and more are recognizing packaging as a brand attribute. For me, like a few years ago, I had a very large e-commerce company that is in the direct-to-consumer outdoor space for fishing and hunting. And the CEO called me and he just said, I'm done with single-use plastic. And I was like, are you serious? No more single-use plastic? Because at that point, we were selling them bubble wrap and air pillows. And I was like, you realize if we transition you from single-use plastic to fiber, it's probably going to cost you 30% more. And he goes, I don't care. He's like, wow. I'm in the outdoor industry. I'm in hunting and fishing. I'm not going to send single-use plastic to my customers anymore. They understand that it's a problem and it doesn't match the ethics of our organization. And he wanted that switch done in a quarter. Now, what we also did was we looked to offset costs everywhere we could. So we tried to, make that transition less expensive. But again, from his perspective, it was no longer about just packaging. It was a part of his brand. And I think that's been a shift with a lot of organizations.
I like that you bring up that story, though, because I think it proves or it shows just how important, good, strong leadership is. There has to be really strong support and buy-in from the top in order to trickle down and say, hey, this is the initiative. Team, go figure it out. We'll deal with the cost, because as you pointed out, it's not always cheaper. Are there other concerns with sustainable packaging that you've had to address, though, too? Performance, what gets people staying on one side of the fence before they jump all the way over? I'm sure there are other concerns as well, right?
There are other concerns. And I want to be sure, too, one of the things we always try to do is we understand that in lots of cases, again, plastic, let's use plastic as an example. Single-use plastic is super cheap. It's one of the reasons it's prolific. It's everywhere. It's because it's really cheap and it's also really adaptable to all these different applications. So when we're transitioning away to a fiber-based solution, there may be a cost impact. And that is the chief concern of everybody we deal with. So you talk about what are people worried about? They're worried about the cost. So what we're trying to do is offset costs in as many ways as we possibly can. And a lot of that is by optimizing the packaging. So we're looking at everything from what does it cost to ship it? Can we cut down on the cube of the box to reduce the shipping cost? What about damage? How much damage are you currently getting? Can we impact that number? We're trying to look at packaging from a holistic perspective. So when we present a sustainable solution, it's really palatable for the brands. So those are the big ones. You've obviously, protecting a product is number one. Always, we want to be sure we protect it really, really well. Luckily, at Atlantic, we have a solution center in Charlotte where we do a lot of this validation to confirm the packaging works properly before we take it to market. But there's other concerns as well. The carbon footprint can be something that people are curious about. Obviously, a lot of products that see moisture. If we're looking at a product that has moisture, we have to take, other things into consideration. Obviously, plastic blocks moisture really well. So we have to look at, coatings on papers and things like that. But again, there's a lot that goes into it. But again, we try to take a really holistic look at it.
Well, and to me, that kind of shows for anybody who is out searching for a supplier, if they're not already working with you guys or somebody like you, finding a partner in your supply chain who is thinking holistically and who is not just saying, hey, here's a menu of eco items that we have. You're really kind of tackling it, like you said, from a 360 vantage point, all in, and kind of pulling all the levers and turning all the dials, which can be really helpful, I'm sure, for your customers, because you're going to make it work no matter what.
Well, and for some of your viewers who may have watched Journey to a New Earth, which was a documentary series we did last year. I mean, we documented taking a surfboard, package from what it was to a fully sustainable version. And we took all that stuff into consideration. I mean, one thing that we looked at is surfboards were really slow to pack. I mean, it took most of the surfboard guys that we talked to 20 to 25 minutes to pack a board. It wasn't efficient at all. With our new system, we took that from 20 minutes to 4 to 5 minutes, so they can get a lot more out the door. So that was another thing we're looking at. How efficient is it? So we're going to look at lots of different, areas to optimize, to offset costs as much as possible. But I also like to say, like, if it's not cost competitive, it's not very sustainable, because no one's going to buy it. So there's a lot of options out there right now that I think are pretty cool, but they're just too expensive. And so I think it's important for, brands that are listening. I mean, we are really focusing on giving our customers solutions that, first and foremost, take into account that it can't break the bank. It's got to be additive to their business.
So before we jump into a New Earth project specifically, I want to touch on those really cool innovations and ask you about, what is out there that's most exciting to you, even if it's not fully scalable yet. You mentioned the shrimp shells. I know there's algae, there's kelp, there's mushrooms, there's mycelium. There's all these innovations. What's got you most excited? What do you see on the horizon in terms of just the packaging space in general? Give us your insights.
Yeah, I mean, first, the first one is just traditional, wood pulp, paper products. We have huge paper infrastructure in this country with paper mills. I mean, that is an old industry that's been here a very long time. And because of sustainability, the amount of innovative energy just going into traditional fiber-based packaging solutions is radical. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. We're bringing a product to market first quarter next year called Canopy Wrap to replace shrink bundling film. And it's a really technical piece of paper. I mean, it's got a lot of technology in it, in the way that it stretches and the way that it holds moisture and repels moisture. And so, like, there's a lot coming just in your traditional paper products, which I love. And then, to your point, there's a lot of other organic products coming to market. There is paper and fiber-based products made from hemp. There's products made from grass fiber that are pretty exciting. And then, a couple of my favorites. You mentioned mushroom packaging. I really love mushroom packaging. There's an organization we're partnered with in the Northeast called Ecovative that's really pioneered this technology. And the cool thing about Ecovative is the feedstock is spores. So it doesn't require land mass to grow trees or hemp. I mean, it's literally spores that eat hemp hurd, which is a byproduct of hemp harvesting, and becomes a mold. And so it's just a really neat product. Now, it's good for certain applications and not others. So again, it's one of those things where you got to be pretty strategic about understanding the markets that it fits. But again, we're really big fans of that. Right now, the thing that I'm working on, like I mentioned earlier, is Cruise Foam. These are super innovative guys that I'm really impressed with the breadth of what they've been able to design from shrimp casings and shrimp shells. Right now, they've got multiple different densities of foam that I think can go into lots of application, everything from cold chain, like shipping meals or shipping drugs that traditionally were in EPS coolers, which is really problematic environmentally. These guys have got a compostable option that I think is going to be great. We're also working some in the appliance industry to get rid of EPS foam. I mean, if anybody's ever bought anything with EPS foam, it's kind of the worst. It never breaks down in the environment. It flakes really bad when it breaks. It's just kind of a disaster. And these guys have a compostable, completely organic solution for that. So I'm thrilled about that. And again, that's one of those cool things where these guys are only a few years old. I mean, this technology is brand new. Kelp, I really like. I mean, the world of biofilms in general is pretty confusing right now. There are a lot of bio-based plastics on the market. The thing that bothers me about a lot of bio-based plastic is today, most of them are coming from corn or sugarcane. That corn is, in most cases, genetically modified, being grown on industrial farms and being sprayed with chemicals. I don't love that as a feedstock, obviously. A lot of the sugarcane is coming from places that used to have rainforests. I don't love that either. So, again, one of the things I think that we bring to the table is asking those kind of questions that a normal consumer just might say, oh, this is a bio-based film made from corn. That sounds better than plastic. Not necessarily. You got to dig a little deeper. But what I love about kelp, kelp grows really, really fast in the ocean. And it also, it can grow as much as 2 feet in a day. And it absorbs carbon at an exponential rate. It is incredible for carbon capture, and it doesn't require land mass. So, now I'm not a kelp farmer, so obviously we're going to have a lot of questions about how sustainably the kelp is managed in those oceans. But I see a future where we could have a feedstock that checks a lot of boxes. And so then it's a matter of how do you scale that and what applications make sense. But I do think the world of bio-based films, especially in food packaging, have a real future. But again, the feedstocks are incredibly important. And I think kelp, as far as what I've seen, it really holds a lot of promise.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I've been hearing a lot about kelp and all sorts of all different, from fuels to food. I eat these kelp burgers that are amazing. So shout out to the Akua company. They make some great kelp burgers. So I'm with you on that. We talked about innovations. We talked about the customers' habit changes with these innovations. I guess too with the expectations of industry. What will it take to get these fully to scale? Is it more innovation? More investment that's going to be required? Is it legislation? Is it more demand? Is it getting more people on board? Or do they think it will their product has to be better and prove itself in the marketplace on its own?
I think it's all of the above. I think legislation is going to have a huge impact. California just passed Senate Bill 54 or SB 54, which will go into effect probably in 2026, 2027, but the law has been passed. It's just they're giving a few years to negotiate all the fees. But basically in California, going forward, packaging will be taxed. And those tax rates will be based on how circular it is. So single-use plastic that's going direct to a consumer is not very circular because we don't recycle single-use plastic very well, really anywhere in the world, certainly not in this country. And so those type products are going to carry a really high fee. So all of a sudden, a lot of these fiber-based, organic, natural materials from a cost perspective in the state of California are going to look a lot more even. So that is going to be a significant driver, I believe. Also, California, I know a lot of the people watching are probably in California. I think I just heard you moved from the 5th to the 4th largest economy in the world. So California has a huge impact. And there are a lot of large companies that are, it's sort of like in the automotive industry, when they came out with all the emissions standards, Ford and Chevy, they're not going to make trucks for North Carolina one way and California another way. They just raise the emission rates for everything. And I think the same will happen in packaging, where California will raise all boats to a more sustainable future. And so I think that's going to have a huge impact. Again, a lot of these newer technologies, some of them are coming from very established companies like Westrock and International Paper, and so those products have staying power because the companies that are developing have huge resources, and Atlantic's a part of that supply chain that's helping evaluate and bring those products to market. Then these other smaller products, I think one way they can get to market best is to partner with me, and I can help show them the right applications where they make sense. I think that's a big piece of it. Sometimes I see these up and coming products, they try to be everything to all people because they don't really understand the supply chain. Finding the right markets for their products. Lots of times, a lot of these startups want to focus on the easier applications. The easier applications are also the cheapest applications. And so that's not always the best fit. So that's one of the things that we're helping them with a lot. But again, I think it's all the above. I think legislation will play a key role. I think consumer demand plays the absolute biggest role. More than anything else, organizations are going to shift as consumers demand that they do that. And then the amount of innovative energy that's going on in our industry right now being driven by sustainability, technology sort of always wins. So the more technology a product has in it, the more viable it typically is.
Awesome. Really great insights. And that's what you guys are bringing to market here collectively with a New Earth project. Tell us about that. It's the collaborative effort. I know it's sort of showcasing all of these innovations that you're talking about, bringing solutions in one stop to the marketplace. Not just an extension of Atlantic. I know there's a bigger mission there to it. Tell us about this project, how it works, how it came about, and what you guys are doing with it.
Yeah. So obviously it's a big passion project for me. The more amazing things I've ever been involved in, and has brought some just remarkable human beings into my life, which has been such a blessing. But it started a few years ago. I mean, I had been very outspoken in our industry about sustainability, very outspoken that I felt like our industry had to shift, that if we didn't own this problem and acknowledge that we were creating it, and commit to ship, that it would never change. I mean, I heard a lot of people talking about ocean cleanups, and I'm all about that. I'm all about beach cleanups. We sponsor a lot of those. I go to a lot of those. We're partnered with a lot of companies that are out there doing that kind of work. But when as a globe, as a world, we're putting 11 million tons of plastic in the ocean every year, and that number is growing exponentially. That estimates are by 2040, that number will be 29 million tons every single year. We're going to triple the rate every single year. You can't clean it up. There's just not enough cleanup efforts in the universe to clean up that much. And so to me, we had to turn off the tap. And I saw that we were in a position to really be a part of turning off that tap. And so I was out there outspoken. Darren Doan, who produced Journey to a New Earth, we had some mutual friends. One of my sales guys lives in his hometown, and so he got familiar with what I was doing. And Darren called me and he said, listen, I think that there's an avenue here in the surfing community. You're a surfer. I used to work at Hurley with Peter King, and he really wants to make a documentary about surfing and conservation, and he's looking for a partner. And Darren said, I just think you guys are just natural fit. And so on the 26th of December, so almost 2 years ago, here in about a month, it really hasn't been that long, Peter and I had a Zoom call, and a New Earth project was born. I had just finished reading Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth, and I love that book, and it had a huge impact on me. And so that's where the name came from. And really the idea was, and kind of talking to Peter, like my life experience of being a surfer was seeing this problem, and I knew I wasn't alone. And then, activating the professional surfing community who's seen this even far greater than I have. I mean, the greatest example I have is Kelly Slater. I mean, the guy has spent 40 years of his life traveling the world to oceans all over the world and watched this problem firsthand. I mean, to me, pro surfers, especially older pro surfers, they're the best authorities we've got. And they're also really compelling people. They're passionate people. And I felt like if we can activate that community and convince them to be advocates for sustainability, that we could really make a difference in the world. And from there, then it was like, we not only need to activate the pro surfing community, but also all the brands, and say, who better to lead in sustainable packaging and cleaning up this problem than surfing companies? And beyond that, just the outdoor industry in general. And like I said, I've been watching what Patagonia was doing. So, I mean, I had a little bit of a playbook. I'm like, that they get it. I mean, in that book, he talks about like getting to a point in his career where he could have retired, but he was like, I looked at all the beautiful places that I've been surfing and climbing my whole life, and they were being lost to climate change. And I wanted to do something to help with that problem, and instead of just moving to the South Pacific. And so I sort of saw Atlantic in a similar light. And so it was about, how do we activate the surfing community, support those brands, which quite honestly is a vertical that Atlantic typically wouldn't have been very focused on just because of the size of it. But sort of the trade-off was like, we're going to bring the resources of Atlantic to support the outdoor industry. And the only thing we're asking in return is just let us tell really beautiful stories. Because that was the other piece of a New Earth project, is like, we as human beings are by nature storytellers. We have been since the beginning of time. I mean, that is who we are. And today, with media and social media and platforms like this, we can tell stories globally. I mean, we can, our reach is just incredible. And so how's to start a movement, activate the outdoor industry, tell beautiful stories, inspiring stories with inspiring people about why we are making this shift to save the only planet that we're ever going to have.
So when brands come to a New Earth project, what are they going to find? They're going to find solutions from different places. Are they going to be able to find solutions for all their different product types? Is there something particular that you're focusing on?
Well, I think the first thing they're going to find is some really incredible human beings. I mean, we have a team of folks that are radically passionate about what we're doing. Everyone that is on our team is here for the right reasons. I mean, it's been remarkable to me. People from all walks of life, all over the country, have just walked through the door and say, I love what you're doing. I want to contribute. So that's the first thing that they're going to see is a lot of really awesome people and a lot of passion. From there, what I've tried to do with our leadership and with our technical people is I wanted to create a platform of products that all brands, especially like in the outdoor space, because a lot is dominated by apparel. And so there's a lot of common products that, companies that are packaging apparel can use. And so we wanted to give a catalog of products that would encompass pretty much everything they would need, from a replacement from a single-use poly bag to a fully sustainable mailer to a fully sustainable void fill that would go in a box, all of those products, fully sustainable carton sealing tape, anything that a brand might need that's common, that any brand. And we created that catalog, and then we bought those products at scale, which was a big deal. And we put them in inventory all over the world, actually. We've got them in this country, we got them in Southeast Asia, we got them in Europe. So we wanted all these brands to have access to these products. That covers, part of the supply chain. The other piece is, especially in hard goods, we needed the ability to create custom packaging solutions because, for things like a surfboard or a snowboard or a mountain bike, these products don't have a baked-in solution. I mean, there's not an off-the-shelf solution for those products. Fortunately, we're in the packaging design business. That's what we do. So what we've asked the brands to do is ship us your hard good products or soft goods if you've got a problematic one, but for the most part, it's hard goods. And we will do an unboxing experience. We'll unbox it the way you currently package it. We'll go to your facility. We'll interview your people. We'll understand what your challenges are. And then we'll spend several weeks and months, redesigning it to meet all the criteria. Like I said, if you watch the documentary series Journey to a New Earth, you can see what we did with surfboards, and we took into account all those things. We took into account damage. We took into account how long does it take to pack it. We took into account the dimensional weight to see if we could reduce that and bring down the shipping costs. And first and foremost, we wanted a solution that was 100% curbside recyclable. And if the products did end up in the environment, down in 8 to 12 weeks, and we accomplished all those goals. And we're currently working on a lot of other really cool products, from mountain bikes to fishing lures to snowboards and skis. It's been really awesome to watch it happen. So again, we sort of cover everything with standard products that about anybody would need, that we buy in bulk, so the pricing is competitive, and then custom packaging solutions for specific products. And then, of course, it's all open source. So we will do a custom product that's specific to a customer if that's what they require. But in most cases, we're trying to design for groups of products that can be utilized across those industries.
I love it. So, your story is so inspiring, the progress that you've made, the solutions that you're bringing to market. It's amazing, Wes. Kind of my last question here, I think, is, you've got this big mission to eliminate plastic pollution, lakes, rivers, the ocean. What's it going to take? Can we get there? What hurdles do we have to overcome? What's the biggest thing standing in our way, do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think we could get there. I'm an optimist by nature. I really believe we can get there. I think actually what you're doing is one of the most important parts. We have to tell these stories. We have to get this information out there. Really activating the technology of media, to me, is the most critical thing we have to do. Educating young people, inspiring young people. I think this is actually a really beautiful story. I like to say, I think this can be our moon landing. I think our generation can stand up in front of this great adversity and use the gifts of all these people from all these different areas and come together for a common goal. And I truly believe that human ingenuity is the way to do it. So, there are forces out there working against us, the status quo. I won't call out any names, but there are organizations and companies that have a vested interest in things staying the same way. I think, we have to overcome that. I think the other area, that we have to overcome is we need government support. We do. The fact that the recycling rate in this country is as low as it is, the fact that we don't have recycling standards in this country, the fact that the recycling rate in South Carolina, where I live, is different than Kansas, is different than California, is different than Maine, because there are no standards. And the reality is we have great technology available, but we need the activation of governments to help create this momentum. It's around waste collection in general. We need industrial composting in every municipality in the entire country. 40% of the food that we create in this country goes into landfills, 40%. And of that 40%, it all creates tremendous amounts of methane, which is 87 times more warming than CO2. And all of that can be composted. And if it's composted, it creates zero methane. So, I mean, there's all these really amazing solutions out there, but we need governments. And what I have seen in the work that I've been trying to do is the partisan nature of our government, especially the federal government, is so toxic that to get government support on this, I mean, I find it insane. I have yet to find the person who is pro-pollution. I can't even find that politician that's pro-pollution. But getting both sides of the aisle to come together on really simple and smart legislation to help support these efforts is difficult. I think it probably has to be done at the state by state level initially until we have enough momentum. So I really do commend. A lot of people think it's funny that a packaging guy would be commending EPR, but I think what California's done is transformational. We need that. We need that catalyst that governments can provide. And lastly, I think we have to be realistic that there are certain parts of this world that are under-resourced, and we have to support third world countries. The oceans know the oceans know no borders. And to think that we can, and I hear people say this, oh, well, the real problem's in Southeast Asia. Well, okay. But I mean, to just blame those 5 Asian countries and say they have the problem and it's not our problem. I mean, the reality is we ship most of our garbage over there for decades, you know, and them stopping to take it is one of the reasons that we're more focused on it now. But again, I think we have to be realistic that wealthy countries like the United States will have to be willing to enter into global treaties to support areas of the world that don't have these resources around circularity, around waste management, things like that. So long answer to your question, but the good news is I think we can get there, but it's going to take a lot of energy.
A lot of energy and a lot of us coming together, everybody doing their part, from leaders in their companies and organizations, from the designers to people, you know, managing packaging, transportation, shipping, whatever it is, retailers, everybody plays a role. So, Wes, thank you for sharing your story, your energy, your insights with us. I think it's going to be really helpful for brands that are looking for solutions, and we'll put in the show notes how they can reach out to you guys, find a New Earth project, and just keep this vision moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Derek. And I will say, I mean, I'm very available. My email address is wesc@atlanticpkg.com. I mean, we are very, very passionate about supporting the outdoor industry, the surfing industry in these transitions. Please bring us your challenges. I promise you, you'll get an incredible effort from our team. We want to be partnered with you guys to make this a reality. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk. And we're here to answer further questions if brands want to engage.
Right on, Wes. All right. Well, thanks for everything. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks, Derek.